The title of this YouTube video today is When People Spread a Bad Report on Your Promise. And welcome back. Glad to have everybody back here. And you are treasured people in this community. And I wanted to just say that this is really encouraging. This is a story of Moses as they're about to, and the Israelites as they're about to go into the Promised Land. And it's in Numbers chapter 13. We'll start in verse 1. It says, "The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. And then it goes on to say which leaders. So they picked one out of each tribe to go into basically the Promised Land. And in verse 17 it says, when Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and onto the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or few, strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. And we'll stop there. Now, don't forget, this is the Promised Land. This is basically, God told the people that this is I'm bringing you into a land flowing with milk and honey, and with, all kinds of good things, all kinds of copper in the soil, like all these other things that basically you need. And we'll start in verse 21. It says, So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob toward Lebo Hamath. They went up through the Negev and came toward Hebron, where Ahiman, all these people, the descendants of Anak lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zon in Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites had cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh and the desert of Paran. There they reported to them the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. "We went into the land which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea along the Jordan." So you look here, these are the leaders of the land. They're like, yes, it is a land flowing with milk and honey. All kinds of great things in the land, but they basically they got afraid, and they looked at all these things that were in front of them. They said, well, the walls, these cities are walled. They are too difficult. Like how, they looked at their physical strength. They look at themselves and they said, these people are bigger than us. They're much more organized. They're in the hill country. It's going to be really hard to get them out. It's going to, they started making all these excuses, and they started actually getting into exaggerations, distortions, fear-mongering, and they started spreading a bad report. They said the Nephilim are there. These giants are there, and we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes. So the way they saw themselves was not the way God saw them, obviously, because God was, first of all, God brought them to deliver them from the most powerful army on earth, which was Egypt at the time. And then they started complaining. They basically said, I'll get into it in a second here, kind of like what they actually say. But it says in verse 30, "Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, 'We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it.' But the men who had gone up with him said, 'We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are.' And they spread amongst the Israelites a bad report about the land they explored. They said, 'The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are great size. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes. We looked at the same to them. And if you look at, you would have thought the leaders, these are the same people that had witnessed the miracles. They had seen all the Egyptian army be drowned in the sea. They had seen all the quail. They had seen the manna. They had seen all these miracles, the water from the rock. They had seen so many miracles that God had done for the people. But here they are at the first sign of walking into their promised land. They just freeze up in fear. And we're going to see how bad this actually gets. Let's go on a little further. It says, that night all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt, or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and our children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. And look at Moses and Aaron. So Moses and Aaron, they fall face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were there amongst those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. The protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. And you see the total difference here. The people, they're to the point where they want to go back to Egypt. They've already, the Red Sea's between them. How are they going back to Egypt? They can't even cross the Red Sea, and they're going to go back to Egypt. They were so locked in fear because it was nothing they experienced before. And they had to get to the point where God was going to deliver them. And this is what happens right before your promise. For all those people that are listening to this, God has given most of you probably a promise. He has said to you, this is my promise to you. And he has confirmed it. He has given you multiple things or different promises, a few promises. And he's confirmed it. And you're right at the edge of your promise. You're sitting right at the edge. And the temptation is to be afraid. You're thinking, this is not going to work. All the voices start coming up. This is not going to work. It's just going to happen like it did last time. This is going to, it's going to go terribly. All the doom, all this doom starts showing up. All these feelings of doom. And I'm kind of making fun of it, but because that's what you feel. Like you almost exaggerate. When you're at the edge of the promise, you start getting afraid, and you almost your mind starts running off with exaggerations of how bad it really is, or how bad it's really going to be, and it's not going to work out. God's going to trick me. God's going to do all this. You can get to that place where everything feels like that, and you've got to. The difference is you've got to remember the miracles in your life. Everybody has miracles in their life that God has done. You can look back 20, 30 miracles that are obvious miracles in your life, and you say, wow, let me recount the miracles in my life. Let me recount what God has done. And you look at it, first of all, Moses and Aaron, they fall face down. They're just in complete humility before God. And what they're doing is they're praying. They're just on their faces praying to God to not destroy this community. They are so, they've been through it so many times with the faithless Israelites, but they're on their faces and they're just praying to God that God delivers, that doesn't destroy the community. And then you look at Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb. They're start ripping their clothes, man. They're so mad at what's going on. They're so mad at the faithlessness around them. And they said, we can do this. It is good. If the Lord is pleased with us. We're not perfect. None of us is perfect. But if you've got to this place in your life where you've really changed things, you've done everything you can do to change, to please God, to do whatever God asks you to do, then why wouldn't he give you the promise? That's the thing you look at, and that's exactly what he says. That's exactly what, I think it was Caleb, Joshua. And he says that if the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into the land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord. And it was a command to take hold of the promised land. They were commanded to do it. And their whole fear was based out of, they just stopped believing that God was going to, I don't know what got in their heads, but it's probably all these old memories of being slaves in Egypt, all this slave training. And you look at Joshua and Caleb and Aaron and Moses, that slave training was gone. Like that, all that thinking, that slave thinking was gone. It wasn't there anymore. They were so over it. They're like, we're marching into the promised land. Exactly. And that's what their attitude was. And even look what Joshua says, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. All these people were like, no. All these other faithless people were like, no, God, they're going to devour us. No, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. Oh my God. And then Joshua even realized their protection is gone. All the pride, all the arrogance that these people, they weren't blessed. I mean, they were blessed by God because they were descendants of Abraham, but they basically, the chosen people, were the people, that Israelites, that were given the promise. And God had told them, I'm going to give you this land. This is your land. And then he said, Joshua realized their protection was gone. All the hope, all these things, because they weren't pleasing God. They weren't seeking after the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were, they had given into all the Canaanites and all these evil, wicked, they'd served all the wicked gods around them. And Joshua was smart enough to realize their protection's gone. Like when we march in there, we have God's protection. We have the Holy Spirit. We have God behind us, and he's going to give us victory. And he says, do not be afraid of them. And then finally God shows up. God shows up, and there is a judgment for those faithless people that were spreading bad report. So the encouraging thing I want to say is that, you're going to have, when you have a promise and that's from God, that is from God, he's confirmed it so many times, people are going to spread a bad report. They're always going to come against you. They're going to say, this isn't going to work. Even the devil is going to come after you. The enemy is going to come after you. He's going to say, this isn't going to work. Everything's going to fail. This is going to be a total disaster. And you have to quiet that loud voice. A lot of times it's that small, still voice where God's still speaking to you. And you've got to quiet that loud voice of the devil that's just roaring and using people around you to discourage you, constantly attacking you, agitating you. But you have to believe that promise is that baby's going to be delivered. That promise is coming. So you have to believe that it doesn't matter if they spread a bad report. Your promise is your promise. So I wanted to encourage you with that, because honestly, you look a couple chapters over, and they go into the promised land. Joshua ends up being the one to deliver them, and Caleb into the promised land with a bunch of 20-year-olds and 20 and 100-year-olds to lead the people into the promised land. And they have to wander around, and for a reason, because of and there were so many examples of faithlessness of these people, so many examples. So it's not like it was just this one time. They had probably like 20 different examples. If you read in Exodus before this, of the times where they just, there was no faith at all in these people. And so, Jesus, what's the encouraging thing is that Jesus says, even a mustard seed of faith, if you just have a mustard seed of faith, if you hold on to that mustard seed, what does that little tiny seed become? It becomes a huge tree, a huge bush. That's because you hold on, you don't let go of that promise. You're going to have days, you're going to have days that go up and down, and you're going to be, as you get closer to your promise, you're going to be more heavily attacked. And then comes your promise. One day that promise comes, and then all that struggle you went through is going to be, when they finally walked into that promised land, and they took over Jericho, and later they crushed the people in Ai and all these different cities that they went into. And it was a miracle from God. It was God that delivered it for them. It wasn't in their strength. And that's hard for people to understand, is that it's not our strength. You can go against people much smarter, much more educated, with much more finances, whatever the enemy is doing, it doesn't matter. That's what God has given you, the resources. He's given you the ability to get to your promise. And you need to not quit, not give up. just like Joshua, just like Joshua and Caleb, they believed. They were like, we're going to go in. This is it. It's exceedingly abundantly, exactly what God said it was. And so I want to encourage you that take courage. Do not give up, no matter what the devil throws at you. And he will lose. It's a fixed fight. You cannot lose if you hold on to your promise and you do not give up. So I want to encourage you with that, and I hope this was inspiring for you, and I hope you're having a great, whatever today is, it's a Tuesday, and this encourage you for the rest of the week. Talk to you soon. Thanks.